Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. Is there ever a perfect moment to chase your dreams? Tony Redondo says no, and he's living proof. In this episode, I'm joined by Tony Redondo, who left school with no qualifications, taught himself English, and climbed into senior management in finance by his late 20s. Tony reveals why waiting is the enemy of success, how setbacks became his fuel for growth, and why showing up every day, just like his inspiration, Olympian gold medalist Daley Thompson, is the real game changer. He also gives us a behind the scenes look at building his business, Cosmos, and how trust drives everything in the financial world. So don't miss his incredible story of resilience, hustle, and application. So hit play wherever you get your podcast.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates, and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today I'm super excited because I have another amazing guest for you. So my guest today is a 40-year financial services veteran and Chartered Institute of Banks associate who founded Cosmos Currency Exchange in 2020 after senior roles at banks and brokerages, including Barclays. Cosmos delivers tailored currency solutions, handling payments and receipts in 35 plus currencies across 50 plus countries. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Tony Redondo. How are you, Tony?
Very well, thank you, Paul. Good to see you.
This should almost be part two, because the conversation we had before we didn't hit the record button, that could have been part one. There could have been an interlude, and this could be moving on. So hopefully bits of what we discussed, hopefully we'll remember bits of that so we can enlighten people. Okay, Tony. So today I'm very excited. We've had a couple of conversations. Shout out to Ian Hunter, because we connected because of Ian Hunter, because of his networking group. So thank you very much, Ian, for this connection. You've got a very interesting background. I alluded to it in the intro, financial background, currency, exchanges and so forth. But your background wasn't that easy, and you managed by hook or crook to navigate into a successful corporate career. But I guess what I'd like to start is at the beginning of your journey, and just about the beginning of your journey and how you transitioned into the corporate arena in the financial services.
Sure. Okay, Paul. So my parents, myself and my younger sister emigrated to the UK in 1975. I was 9 years old. We didn't have a word of English between the four of us. My parents came here for economic reasons, because they wanted a better life for their children, something that Portugal couldn't give. The previous year, a 50-year fascist dictatorship had ended. Lots of colonies given away, including Mozambique, where I was born in Africa. And the place was pretty chaotic, to put it mildly. So we came to the UK. We settled in the East End in Hackney, which is an interesting area, shall we say. Quite fashionable nowadays, I understand.
A friend of mine
back in the 70s, I could think of lots of words to describe it, but fashionable wouldn't come close. They weren't easy times. Obviously the economy was very poor in the mid 70s. You've had miners' strikes. You've had Dennis Healey, the Labour Chancellor, going off to the IMF for an emergency loan. You had 3-day working weeks, you had power strikes, and then in '79 you had the winter of discontent. So there were tough times, and at a time of also a lot of social unrest. The National Front were very strong. The Irish hunger strikes were going on at the time. So inner city riots were going on. So it was a pretty tough area, but you either sank or swam. And I don't like sinking.
Can I ask a quick question? That was clearly so you guys arrived at a really challenging time. You didn't arrive in a booming market. You almost arrived in a depressed market. So the reason I just wanted to interject, I don't know, did you ever discuss with your parents? Was there ever any question or thinking, why don't we just go back to Portugal or maybe somewhere or try somewhere else?
Yes, there were discussions like that, and we did discuss it as a family. I remember distinctly, to the credit of my parents, they were very open about those things. But we always discussed that, we've come this far, and actually, yes, it's tough, but it's no easier back home. Okay. So the question then is, which country, once it starts to recover, is going to provide the better facilities, going to provide the better opportunities. And we decided it was the UK, and I certainly don't have any regrets with that. I'm very proud of my Portuguese background, but the minute I turned 16, I became a British citizen, and I've been a British citizen and a British passport holder ever since, and I'm very proud to be British, just with a Portuguese background.
Yeah, and do you still speak Portuguese?
I do. I'm bilingual. I still speak. What quick funny story. Last time we were in Portugal, I went to a supermarket to get some things and spoke in Portuguese to the lady at the till. And she turned around to me and she said, for an English person, you speak excellent Portuguese. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. So I said, thank you very much.
Yeah. That's nice to hear. And what part of Portugal are your parents from, or were you raised?
So I was born and raised in Mozambique in Africa.
Okay.
But my parents are from an area of Portugal called the Alentejo, which is basically the farming district. So most people know Portugal from the Algarve down the bottom with the holidays, or the big cities, Lisbon or Porto. The Algarve the Alentejo is above the Algarve, right next to the Spanish border. It's a semi-arid region. What that means is that in the summer, temperatures often go to 45, 50 degrees centigrade. But
dangerous.
In the evenings, with no cloud cover, it can go down to minus figures. It's semi-arid. So again, really tough to farm in. That's my family background, is farming. But they do mainly arable and pigs, pig farming, arable, wine, and again, I have very fond memories of going back to Portugal in a 6-week summer holidays to help my uncles out with the harvest. And again, it just gave me a completely different perspective on life. I would go from, quite frankly, the concrete jungle of Hackney to a semi-arid Mediterranean landscape where, well into my teens, my uncle's houses did not have running water or electricity. So for 6 weeks, I was in that environment with, you had candlelight and you had water in a well. And then I'll get on an airplane. Somebody will take me back to Lisbon. I'll get on an airplane. I'll come back to London, put on my school uniform and go to school in one of the biggest cities in the world. So it was
what a contrast.
Interesting perspective.
What a
contrast, yeah.
It is crazy, isn't it? Different. We're all children of this earth, but depending on where we live, our experience day to day can be so different.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible.
Right. Exactly right.
So tell me about school. So you arrived as a youngster. in England in the 70s, and then all of a sudden, you go to school, I guess, with your siblings. What was that like going to school in, I guess, particularly actually, because you didn't speak any English?
I didn't speak any English, so the first couple of years were tough because I basically had the last year of primary school. So I had 1 year of primary school in the UK and then straight into secondary school.
Wow.
And so I was so far behind in my English that really for the first 2 or 3 years, the only things that I could kind of like cope with are maths, naturally numerate. So, and maths is the universal language. So maths and sports were my two things. Everything else I really struggled with. But again, circumstances sometimes have a habit of things happening for a reason. So I was used to a hot, dry climate year round. Yeah, born and raised in Southern Africa, 10 months in Portugal, into the UK. We arrive in the UK in January. I've never been so bloody cold in my
Yeah, I
life.
can imagine.
So the first thing that happened is I got bronchitis. I recovered from that and I got chickenpox. So I missed the second half. I was supposed to have the second half of the second to last year in primary school, but I was ill. But because of that illness, I was pretty much bedbound. So what my
You were
parents
really
did,
up against it.
yeah, but in a way, but on the other hand, my parents bought me an English, Portuguese, Portuguese, English dictionary. And my dad would bring home day old newspapers, English newspapers, the Times and what have you. And I would literally, there were days when there was one TV channel, or maybe
Yeah.
two, I've always loved to read. So I would literally sit there with a dictionary and a newspaper going through word association. And then I started reading books in English that I'd read in Portuguese. So I knew the stories, from the Robert Louis
Yeah,
Stevensons and Jules Verne's and those kind of people. So I knew the story. I just had to word associate again. And that's really how I learned English, much more than school.
really. So you were teaching yourself,
Yeah, in a way.
taught yourself.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, it was really, it's turned out to be really helpful training for the rest of my life because it taught me that if you want something badly enough, just go and do it.
Yeah, I
Don't
love
wait
that
for perfect
attitude.
circumstances. Don't complain about your individual circumstances. Don't wait for perfect circumstances. Just get on with it.
Mm.
Just do it.
Yeah, we can't hear that rhetoric often enough. There's never a perfect moment, and I think it's very easy to, without the education, without the right people in our lives, to actually wait for the perfect moment. How
Yes.
often do you have conversations with people and say, "Well, don't do it now. Wait till everything in your life is more settled."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, well, my life's never settled really. My life's never really settled in that way. There's always something going on, either with me, with a sibling, with my partner, with my mum or dad, or at work. There's
Yeah.
always something going on, so it's never like that. And I've 100% been guilty in the past of actually using that language,
Yeah.
like, let's wait until, it's better, well, wait until I'm more settled. And you kind of and then all of a sudden, lots of those ideas that we've had over the years, we kind of forget about them. And what was that idea you had the other day, Paul, where you was on about, well, 6 months ago? I can't remember. Just
I was blessed, Paul. I was very lucky. I had a grandfather on my dad's side of the family who was very worldly wise, had an extremely tough life himself, much, 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 much tougher circumstances than me by, not even by a different dimension. But he wasn't bitter with it,
Mm,
but he was just full of wisdom. I remember him teaching me how to drive. I was like, it was in one of my uncle's farming, so it wasn't a public road. Okay, so he was teaching me how to drive a tractor to help out with the harvest because I was quite tall for my age, so that helped. And he was teaching me how to drive a tractor. And of course, these tractors were ancient and they certainly didn't have power steering or any nonsense like that. So I remember distinctly him saying to me, he was stationed, ignition off, try and turn the steering wheel. Oh, no, I could hardly budge the bloody thing. He then started it. Carrie started it. We went off at like 5 miles an hour or something. Now turn the steering wheel. Dead easy. And it wasn't until years later that I came back to me thinking, it's much easier to change direction at speed than standing still. It's much lighter touch.
Yeah.
So the point being, don't wait for perfect circumstances. Just
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
If you might not be perfect. You might go slightly off that tangent, but because you've made up so much ground, you can turn it round. Don't have to stay on course. You can change. But at least you'll be further forward than sitting there waiting for perfect scenario, which, as you say, is never going to happen.
And also, whenever we decide to act, it's probably going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to quite know what we're doing.
Yep.
But repetitive action, those small, sometimes we don't even realize we're learning, but we're learning and it's becoming less uncomfortable. It might get real uncomfortable initially, but the process of repetition, daily, doing little things and maybe not putting our expectations too high, manage ourselves a little bit. Yeah, that's how anybody that's great at anything, that's what they do. And their magic is what you've said, that they just get on with it. So yeah, so I think that's, if we take anything away from this episode, I'm taking that, and I hope everybody else listening and watching takes that as well, because that's definitely a sign that if we've got ambition, if we've got a desire, if we've got a dream, that's the best place to start with. Starting. So we spoke before, and you told me that you left school with no qualifications. Do I remember correctly?
I hated school. Hated school.
When the little bit that you just said about, I didn't realise that you started secondary school pretty much instantly. You only had 1 year primary school. I thought of myself not speaking English and having to jump into secondary school even almost right away. Massively handicapped. So tell me a little bit about school. And you left without qualifications, but you love maths.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a challenge because I would go to a history lesson, I'd go to a geography lesson, I'd go to whatever lesson, and I couldn't understand what most of all people were talking about. So it was very frustrating first 2-3 years. But again, because I was quite involved with the sports teams of the school, I made friendships, and a lot of those people were born in the UK, but from foreign parents.
Okay.
Whether they be West Indian or Turkish or Cypriot or Italian or whatever, or Spanish. There was a real mixture at the school. And so there was a way of communicating. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I love to read. So I've always read a lot. I was one of those kids that hid a torch and a book underneath my bed. Really? So when Mum said lights out,
I remember seeing you guys.
Okay, Mum, 10 minutes, put a torch on. And so I started to pick up. So initially, academically, I really struggled other than maths. But by the time I got into like the 4th, 5th year, I was beginning to understand enough English, but I couldn't wait to get out of school. So I left school at the earliest opportunity. I then went to college, which again wasn't in a brilliant area. It was in King's Cross, slightly better at the time than Hackney, but not exactly Eton and Oxbridge, a million miles away. But it was better. But I guess the different environment, I've always felt is important. It's important to me The fact I didn't have to wear school uniform, I could wear what I wanted to wear. You were treated as pretty much an adult, even though you were 16 years old, And a year later, I had 10 O-levels.
So let's say that again.
A year later, I had 10 O-levels.
Okay, because I was going to ask you what you did at college. So did you do your exams again?
Yeah, I had to retake them all.
Okay, really? So when you say you had to retake them all,
Well,
did
I
you
didn't have to,
them
but
all?
I wanted to.
You wanted to.
I wanted to retake them all.
Okay.
Because all of a sudden I kind of like dropped reading books in Portuguese. I dropped speaking to my parents in Portuguese.
Really?
Just
Okay.
focused intensely on English all the time. And the different environments, perhaps different types of teachers who were used to teaching adults, perhaps, I don't know, or maybe it was just something clicked. But yeah, I ended up with 10 O-levels. I then
Incredible.
I then did 4 A-levels, pure maths, applied maths, economics.
Those are the subjects that people run kicking and screaming from.
And physics. And my dream at the time was I've always been fascinated by astronomy.
Okay.
And my dream at the time was to do something with astrophysics. Until I found out that the degree course was 7 years long. And there was no way my parents could afford for me to be at university for 7 years. Not a chance.
How do you retain interest in a course if you've got to study it for 7 years? And you've got to pay for it as well, but even having interest in it.
Exactly. So I went through a phase, by that time I was like 18, 19, and I really wasn't sure what to do with myself. I knew what I wanted to do, but I also knew that it wasn't going to happen. And then I got lucky. Total issue of being in the right place at the right time. I was 19 years old, Paul, in 1985. And in 1985, the second Thatcher government liberalised financial services. So before 1985, the City of London was a closed shop. You basically had to be invited in.
Okay.
So if you didn't go to the right schools, you didn't know the right people, the recruitment process was very against you. But all of a sudden, they liberalised financial services, all these international banks flooded in, and they needed staff. And I thought to myself, okay, it's not astrophysics, but it's dealing with numbers, banking, might be able to work internationally, might be able to work in different types of clients. It's numbers. That was my career decision made. And I got a job offer from the TSB. I got a job offer from Barclays. I got a job offer from somebody else that I can't remember. I don't think they exist anymore. And I thought, Barclays. So
well, you got lots of job offers even.
I got 3 job offers, yeah. And so that was fun. And again, I was very, very lucky in that I got a position, just pure drawing of straw. I don't know, it was certainly nothing to do with me. But I was invited to start at the Pall Mall, which is just off Trafalgar Square, the West End of London. It's one of the tops. I've learned later, it's one of the top 6 branches in the UK.
Really?
And that's where I started. And within 6 months, I was the gopher for the guy that run internal inspection, which is basically the fraud squad inside the bank.
The what, sorry?
The fraud squad.
The fraud? Wow, how interesting.
And I was his gopher, basically. But Henry turned out to be a real mentor for me. We got on very, very well. He was a great guy in a sense that he was very intelligent, very bright, but a real easy good communicator. Most people had a problem with Henry because he could bark and he didn't take fools gladly. But I liked him instantly, and we got on like a house on fire. And he turned out to be a real mentor. He encouraged me to study for those Chartered Institute Bankers exams. He encouraged me to spread my wings when I was halfway through those exams away from Barclays. he said to me, Barclays is good if you like being a number in a big machine, but you are going to end up like me. And what he meant by that is, in private, he told me that, he'd been up for promotion to director level many times. He'd always been turned down because he'd always rubbed somebody up the wrong way.
Yeah.
So he wasn't part of the old boys club.
Yeah, and that's frustrating, isn't it? When actually, it's almost like a token gesture, you applying for these jobs, or even but sometimes I've been aware of companies where if you put a position up, then in order for that position up, you have to have a certain quota that apply for that role.
That's
so
right.
You get encouraged to apply for it, and somebody might tell you that this has happened over the years where so-and-so's already got that job. So-and-so's already got that job. I'm not saying that happens now, but definitely it has happened over the years where they need a quota, and you might be encouraged to go for that job. Yeah, there's a couple of people that are definitely going to get that job ahead of you.
He said, I remember him saying to me, trouble with you is if somebody asks you a question, you answer it. And that's fine, but it's not political enough to get where you want to go and where perhaps your talents deserve. In a big organization, the number one skill is politics, not talent, not results, politics.
Really?
And he said to me, you're about as political an animal as I am. So I would strongly recommend spread your wings. Go to a small place, go to a startup where you can make a difference.
Okay. So just to go back to what he was saying about answering questions, was he suggesting that it probably pays for people that thrive in these environments? They're more tactical in terms of what information they offer and what they don't, because you can use that information maybe creatively to leverage yourself.
People that, for example, people that like internal meetings. Why do people like internal meetings? Because it gives them a chance to be in front of the top boss.
Yeah.
Might not actually contribute anything meaningful, might not have any solutions, certainly might not do the heavy lifting of sorting something out. But they sound good, they look good, they connect to the right people. I'm not sure if I'm going too far by saying this, so please edit this bit if it's too strong a language, but they blow smoke up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. That's not strong.
But then you've got other types of people who are not interested in that, or either they're generally not interested, or they're not interested and no good at it because they're just personality-wise, it doesn't suit them. But they're brilliant with clients. They're brilliant with actually doing the work. They're flexible, they're hardworking, they're intuitive, they get on with their teams, their team gets on with them. But somehow they never rise to the top jobs. Why?
Yeah.
Certainly that was my experience. I hope things have changed for the better. But in my experience in the City of London for the first 17 years of my career, I saw that time and again.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I've seen that in my career as well. But I hope, like you, that is probably, hopefully decreased somewhat.
Yeah.
But we don't know. So your mentor, so you've gone through this challenge of arriving in Portugal, in London, in a depressed time in England in the 70s where it was really, really bleak, and you had to, didn't speak any English. You've had to learn English, didn't get the exams at school, went to college. So you've shown this ability to roll with difficult moments and transition. When you didn't get your qualifications, if I can just go back to that slightly, how did that feel mentally to you? And how did it feel mentally to you?
It confirmed to me that you can make up in hard work, or you might lack in circumstances.
So did you know that, were you confident after you didn't get the results that you knew that, I guess deep down you probably knew that you're capable of, clearly you're capable of a lot more, but did you know that? Did you know that hard work, did you know that with hard work get his O level? Did you feel that? You want
There were
someone
lots of little examples throughout my life. There were lots of little examples throughout my life, from childhood to adolescence, even going back to school, which, as I mentioned, I didn't enjoy at all, but I did enjoy the sports side. And again, I was part of the school athletics, basketball, football, rugby, cricket, you name it. Okay. I was never the fastest, Paul. I was never the strongest. I certainly wasn't ever particularly able or flexible or agile or hand-eye coordination. I was never a superstar. But I was always in a team.
Yeah.
Why? Because I always worked hard, because I always applied myself. So as I grew up, there were countless of these little examples before me, whether it was learning English largely by myself at first, whether it was surviving the hurly-burly of the streets, whether it was on a sports field. There were countless examples of you can overcome lots with just effort.
I listened to a podcast or YouTube. It's called the Soft White Underbelly, and one of my favourite authors was on there, Stephen Pressfield, and he kind of says ultimately what you just said, that he became an author at 52, and he wanted to become an author like pretty much all his life, and he'd done all these different jobs, and he was saying that he was almost living a shadow life because he wasn't pursuing what he wanted to pursue. But then he said that one of his biggest realizations for him, and I think he got the realization a lot later in life than you, but he got this realization that if you work hard, you can overcome anything, even if you hit rock bottom. He's not worried about that. When I say he doesn't want to hit rock bottom, but he knows if he does, if he works hard, if he puts the work in, he knows that he can overcome anything. I've got that recollection from listening to you.
I remember one thing from like college time. So again, I did quite a lot of sport at college. I've always enjoyed sport, and I was very, very lucky. Again, right place at the right time, Paul. A friend of one of my sports coaches was none other than Daley Thompson.
Really?
At the time was decathlon champion of Great Britain.
So he was your sports coach?
He was a friend of my sports coach.
Okay. Wow.
And we met him. He came to one of our training sessions one day. And I always remember like it was yesterday. I was about 17 years old, so it's a long time ago. And but what was interesting about Daley, he was very down to earth, very ordinary, simple guy. Very charismatic.
Yeah, I was going to say that's immediately what I think of him.
Really charismatic, but no hoity-toity, none of that. In a tracksuit, what have you. Hello, lads. How you doing? Blah blah blah. And we were playing touch rugby, and you can get a handle on him.
He was good at rugby as well, wasn't
he? Yeah, I'm not sure if he did, but he.
No, he's good at it, I believe.
He honestly, it looked like he glided over the earth. His feet were so fast, it didn't look like he actually touched the ground. You couldn't catch him. You thought, I'm going to nail him, bang, and he's gone because he's twisted that way or turned that way or what have you. And then I remember one conversation. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with him over lunch, and people were asking him questions. And then I asked a question, and I said, don't take this the wrong way, Daley, but, you are British, Commonwealth, European, World, Olympic, blah, 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 champion. You are the man. But you're not 6 foot tall. You're not 6 foot wide. How? And there was a bit of an intake of breath as the audacity of the question. But Daley just laughed his head off. And he goes, that's a really good question. What's your name? Tony. That's a really good question, Tony. Let me explain something. When I started showing a little bit of interest in the decathlon and started going to international events, I very quickly worked out that the people that got regularly selected at a national level trained every day, including their birthday, including Christmas. Every day they trained. And that's what set them. That was a principal thing. They were all shapes and sizes, but that was a principal thing that set them apart from the rest, who occasionally made the team or never made the team. And then after a couple of years, I started to work out that there was always the same 5 or 6 people in the top 5, 6, 7 positions. It just, depending on some, a little bit of luck or inspiration, the sort of, the numbers sequence changed, but it's always the same kind of people. So I started looking into what are they doing different. Do you know what I find out? These people trained twice a day, every day, including their birthday, including Christmas. And that consistency set them apart. Okay? That makes sense. So, it's easy, Tony, he says to me. Nobody, much to my surprise, he says to me, nobody was mad enough to train 3 times a day, every day, including Christmas and birthdays. And that's all I did. Now, I have no idea whether that's true or not, because obviously I wasn't a mate of his or around him when he trained. But I did ask a follow-up question of, how can you fit in 3 training sessions a day? He goes, that's easy. So I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I stretch for half an hour, I go and do my aerobics, which is a run. And I run probably half marathon. Come back, shower, breakfast, sleep for a couple of hours. Get up about midday, and I'll go and do technical training. So Monday might be javelin, Tuesday will be the high jump, Wednesday will be maybe the 100-meter and the 110-meter hurdles, whatever. And I'll do 2-3 hours of that. Over and over again. The sprint start, the launch, the spin or the discus, whatever it might be. And then I'll go home, I'll shower, I'll eat, I'll sleep for a couple of hours. And then about 7 o'clock in the evening, I go to the gym. And that's when I do the weights. And that's all I've done. That's it, he says to me. Now, as I said, I have no idea whether this is true or not. But again, that was so important to me because I started reading up on this guy and thinking, okay, so this guy, is half Nigerian, half Irish.
I didn't know half Irish.
Yeah, half Irish, half Nigerian. Family, just working class family. Nothing special scores-wise. And they said he wasn't hugely tall. He wasn't hugely bulky. He wasn't like one of these strong men. There wasn't an ounce of fat on him.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay. And that's always stuck with me. Again, another example that you can, and some people go, yeah, but not everybody can do that. But my answer is this, and the conclusion, I came to this conclusion, rightly or wrongly, I might be completely nuts, okay? But my conclusion of all this, Paul, was simple. If you don't try, you're guaranteed to fail. So you've got to try to give yourself a chance.
Yeah, no, I totally concur. And I do believe that because I've heard that type of story delivered by so many athletes who are at the top of their game that just do it a little bit more consistently. Like I've heard Kobe Bryant did something like that where he trained, he would get up super early. And so I think whatever time when he played for the Lakers, whatever time his teammates and he was due to train, he would have already done 2 or 3 hours. And somebody asked him, why did you do that? He goes, well, if I train 3 hours, so on average per day, if I've done 3 hours training for my colleagues, not just my colleagues, but for my competitors, get up, start their process, then if you accumulate that over the course of a week, over the course of a month, over the course of the year, it's impossible for them to catch me because I've got all this accumulated time that I'm spent working on my fitness, working on my nutrition, working on my mental health, working on my ball skills. It's impossible for them to catch me. I thought, wow. And then I thought, it's that discipline. I wish I was served that. I wish you could go to Amazon and just press order. I want to buy some discipline. I want to buy. Imagine if you could bottle that. Maybe maybe we're worth than that. We had an AI conversation this morning. Why don't we?
That's right.
Yes. But just go back to Daly. You'll probably remember this. With Daly, I remember that he always had to accumulate as many points as he could for the last event.
Yeah.
The last event, I think, was the 800 or something, and he always. I think that's probably his weakest event, and it's almost like, oh, bloody got to do the 800 meters now, and he always had to he would never win it. He would always finish maybe 10th or something like that, but he always had enough points to actually win it. If he hadn't accumulated enough points before the 800, then he would have to run a proper 800 where he had to put it in, but the 800 for him, because he'd already got the points because of the discus and the 110 hurdles, and I forget all the other events. Javelin's one of them, I think you said earlier. He invariably would win all these events, all these major Olympics, World Championships. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Thanks for that story, because I think it really encapsulates the importance of that work ethic and that discipline, because that's something that we all have access to. We don't have to pay for that. We don't have to pay for discipline.
Yeah.
We don't have to pay for hard work.
That's right.
So these are things that invariably, like what has made Kobe Bryant great, what has made Dave Thompson great, I was about to say great, the best, Michael Jordan was the same, was discipline.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting concept to think about, that sometimes it's very easy not to be disciplined because we think, well, we can find lots of excuses to think, well, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe I won't train today. Maybe I'll train. Maybe I'll just go and meet my friends at Pizza Express. So what I wanted to ask you now was startup. So you got involved in the startup. What was that process like?
Yeah, again, really interesting. I joined a very small trust company that specialized in property finance. And again, some very interesting characters, some really interesting experiences. I joined it was a tiny firm, lender of last resort, which basically means that people went there because they had no choice. So they've been rejected by the banks. They've been rejected because they either had no experience, or they had a bad credit history, or something that went wrong in their lives, or something that was not right. But they wanted to do something, and so they came to this specialist leader. So it was very much, sharp end stuff. But again, as the economy goes in cycles, a few years later, I'm now fully qualified. I've got 5, 6, 7 years experience, and the UK goes through a massive UK-wide property recession, where before the recession there was probably 350 active property lenders, and that went down to 6, and we were one of 6.
That's insane.
So all of a sudden, the quality of the person coming through the door went up exponentially, because all of a sudden, it didn't matter if they played golf with the NatWest bank manager, NatWest wasn't lending, so they had to come to this firm. And again, because I started at a junior level there, I was basically the note taker for the chief executive. I was the chief executive's PA.
But you learned a lot.
I learned a lot, because this guy was the second bank he had started, You're very experienced. And again, talk about being in the right place at the right time. You've got to remember, I'm talking about the 80s and 90s. So long before computers and the internet and email, long before credit scoring.
No AI.
No AI. Bank managers were bank managers, and they knew their clients.
Yeah.
And again, so many stories I could share with you if we had time, Paul, of, I remember one day, for example, one of my jobs was to greet the client at the front door, welcoming him in, sit them down in the reception area, go and sort out refreshments, and bring them through to the meeting room when the boss was available and signaled. And then I'll sit quietly in the corner taking the notes for the meeting there. That's fine. And I remember one day this guy turned up in a chauffeur-driven limo, got out of the car, suit, big watch, nice shoes, the works. When I got close to him, he was wearing a pinstripe suit. And when I got close to him, I noticed that in the pinstripe of the suit were the symbols of different currencies. So it was like the dollar sign, the pound sign, the yen. The euro didn't exist at the time, in the pinstripe of the suit. So he came in for a loan. And much to my amazement, the boss said no. But I didn't have a chance to ask him straight away because the next client was in. Anyway, straight in, he goes out, crestfallen. Next person comes in, typical farmer. He's got muddy boots on. He's got corduroy trousers full of patches. He's got a jumper with the leather patches on the elbow. And they shake hands, and he's in and out with a yes in 5 minutes. And I'm completely bamboozled how this guy in the limo with a smart suit got turned down, and this farmer type, there wasn't even any paperwork. They shook hands. But one of the benefits of the job, and the reason why I took the job, is because there were no layers of management between me and the boss. I was his note taker. I was his right-hand man.
Valuable.
So it was a fantastic experience because I could bother, in exchange for making him another cup of tea and what have you, I could ask him questions. Why did you turn this person down? What was wrong with this person? But how comes you said yes? How comes you said no? And year after year of learning this stuff, by the time I actually started to lend, I had accumulated a lifetime of experience, not from me, but from somebody who was very senior within the banking world. So the company grew, we got bought out, we moved to the City of London, got bought out a couple of times. I ended up in senior management in my late 20s.
Okay, wow. So that trajectory to go from a youngster that arrived in the 70s, again, couldn't speak English, leaving school without any qualifications, going to do your O levels literally a year later, not just like 8, let's say 10 O levels is quite a lot. That's probably more than typically people would do, right? Isn't 10
I think at the time the average was about 7 or 8.
Yeah, 7, like even 8. I think 8 would have been like probably the top in terms of number. And then in your late 20s, you're senior. That's quite a transformation.
Yeah, it was. Slightly political, but it's true. I was the first non-British born person in a lot of these positions. I was certainly, one of the very few, if not the only one, who hadn't gone to a grammar school or hadn't gone to Eton private school, hadn't gone to Oxbridge, that kind of stuff. But again, it's interesting how life works out. My career really took off when I started lending, and I had the ability to communicate with the clients. Because when I went on the building site, one of the things I learned very quickly is, even before I started lending by myself, so just to backtrack a bit, I was still assistant to Ted, the head honcho. And we'll go out on a site visit, and I'll take my own car. And so let's say the appointment was for 11 o'clock in the morning. I would turn up at 10. And I would spend an hour going round the site, talking to the chippy, talking to the bricky, talking to the plumber, talking to the sparky about, are you getting paid on time? Are you having to wait for materials? What's he like? Blah, 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 blah. And then my boss would arrive and the developer would arrive in their big cars and all the rest and have the official meeting, where clearly the developer client, would tell my boss what he thought my boss wanted to hear, about how everything is wonderful and everything's good and what have you. But then when we got back in the office, Ted would call me in and goes, right, well, I've had what he wants me to hear, but he knew what I was up to. He quickly cottoned on what my game was. He said, what did you find out in that hour beforehand? And I'll tell him. And of course, it's then much easier to control a loan book because you're not just being fed some BS story from the developer. You're getting the news on the ground, because I would give out my business card to the Sparky and go, if there's any problems with payments, okay, this isn't a charity. He's employed you. If you're not getting paid, don't complain about it. Don't cry about it. Phone me.
So I had no idea that clearly that doesn't happen today. I'm pretty sure, but
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea that there was that level of due diligence that obviously you did. I don't know whether that was something that typically people were doing at the time, but that, I guess, from your point of view, if you're going to lend, then you've got a good idea that this person is able to have essentially the money to pay.
Yeah, but it's the even more important than the money to pay, Paul, funnily enough, is the character of the person.
So why would that be more important?
Because the reason why, going back 2 years earlier, why Ted turned down the guy, when I asked him the question, the guy that came in a limo with the pinstripe suit or from Savile Row and all and he said no to. Why? Ted would laughed his head off and goes, how do you know he owns the suit? He might have rented it for the day. Whereas the farmer that came in owns half of Hertfordshire.
Oh, really?
He's not wearing. I've known him for 30 years.
Okay.
You think he's going to default on my little loan?
Yeah.
You've got to be kidding. No way is he going to default.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
And 100%, I don't know whether they'd have rocked up in a limo or a Rolls Royce, but 100% people that maybe didn't have the money would have rented a nice suit so they could try and convey that they've got that money.
That's right.
Successful corporate career.
Mm-hmm.
1990 arrived, so we're speeding up a little bit, but 1990 arrived, and then was 1990 pivotal. Was that a financial recession going on in that period?
92 was the big recession.
92 was a recession. Okay, tell me a little bit about that period.
Yeah, it was spectacular growth because, as I said, nothing to do with us other than we were very lean, mean, well run, on top of our game, had a good team, and circumstances dictated that we went from one of 350 lenders to one of 6. So the quality of the loan book went up exponentially, and to the point where we got bought out twice, moved to the City of London. And then around about 97, they announced the introduction of the euro. Because, of course, before 99, the Germans added their Deutschmarks and the French had their francs and the Italians had their lira and the Portuguese had their escudo and so on and so on and so on. All of a sudden. And I kind of were using what I'd learned at Goldsmiths University, where I did my banking qualifications, and all the years under Henry and then Ted, I kind of felt that, I can't think of a single instance in history where a new currency has been introduced and it has not been inflationary. So therefore, it was a pretty easy call to suggest which way the individual currencies that were going to be abolished and converted to euros were going to get pegged at and what was going to happen to them. And from 94, 95 onwards, I started to get involved in the foreign exchange market. Again, like a lot of things in my life, Paul, it wasn't out of some brilliant blue sky thinking on my part. It was purely that I was quite involved with my clients. I've always liked knowing who I'm dealing with. And as people got wealthier off the back of as you said earlier, in that property recession of 92, the people that didn't know what they were doing went under. The people who barely knew what they were doing barely survived. But the people who knew what they were doing made a fortune because all of a sudden, land prices came down. There wasn't a competition for plots as much as there was in the good times. Building costs came down, materials costs came down, labour costs came down. Interest rates came down to rescue the economy. So everything went in their favour. And of course, the whole market took off and they took off with it. And so as my clients got wealthier, they inevitably, the typical client for me at the time would have been two jobbing builders, mates, who are a little bit more ambitious than normal, wanted to start off with a little apartment in Putney or something, you know? And of course, they would go to the bank. The bank would say no because they've got no experience. But how can they gain experience if you don't give them a chance to start? The old chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
So they'll come to somebody like us, and 5 years later, they've done 20 developments of one shape or size or other, and they're both in detached houses. Both the partners or wives have stopped working. The kids are in private school. They've got nice cars in the drive. And then all of a sudden, the fashionable at the time, it still is, but it was very fashionable then, was to buy a holiday home abroad. And again, purely nothing to do with me, just luck, that Portugal is very popular with the British, the oldest political alliance in the world, 2.5 hours away by airplane, year-round sunshine, and I know the language and I'm bilingual. So I could help them, depending if they were golfers or they wanted city nightlife or they wanted to put their kids into a private university or whatever the circumstances were, I could guide them. I had the language skills. So by the time they came to actually complete on the purchase of their villa or apartment or whatever it was, they basically, most of them would turn around to me and say, well, you've done everything else. Can you just buy the bloody currency, please, when you think timing is right? I need the money in the solicitors by this date. And when they then announced the euro, I thought, I know what's going to happen here. It's going to be inflationary. So I decided to invest some of my own money at the time, and it worked out really well. It worked out as predicted. Then came another hurdle in my life. My first marriage fell apart, and I went through a bit of a tough time. There were children involved, and then I decided, enough's enough. So went to work abroad and did some traveling. Again, language skills. Again, like I said, when I was a 19-year-old kid, the beauty of banking is that there are banks all over the world.
Yeah.
And maths is the same language. You might not be able to speak, French or Norwegian or Swiss or what have you, but you can do numbers and you can read a balance sheet and make a lending decision on exactly the same principles. So I did a bit of traveling and did a little bit of day trading for a few years. There were the days when laptops kind of like were heavy enough to dislocate your shoulder.
Yeah, I've had a few of those over the years.
You may remember those years.
Yeah.
And so, I carried around the world a bloody laptop that often dislocated my shoulder, but it worked. And then we came back to the UK. And luckily, by that time, I'd met a young lady. She was a friend of my secretary in my last years in the City of London. And again, pure luck on my part. This young lady, all her childhood holidays were in Cornwall. And both me and her had loved London when we were younger. But to actually start a family and settle down, no thank you. And so she said, well, let's go down to introduce you to Cornwall. And we came down. For me, what's not to like? Beaches, countryside, nature, lovely. And we've been lucky enough to live in Cornwall since 2006.
Yeah, okay, wow. I forgot you mentioned you're in Cornwall when we spoke previously. Wow, it's a lovely part of the world. Beautiful part of the world. So for people that don't, I guess me as well, that want to understand what currency exchange is, what does that mean and what are you doing there? And I want to get onto a bit more of that with Cosmos as well, but just for the uninitiated, what does that mean?
Sure. So different countries can have the same currency or they can have different currencies. So we've got the pound sterling in the UK, the Eurozone has got the euro, the Americans have got their dollar, the Canadians have got their dollar, and so on. And currency exchange is simply exchanging your native. So if you're paying a supplier, let's say the supplier is in Sweden. It's no good paying sterling to him because then he's got the bother. He or she has then got the bother of having the costs and hassle of converting the sterling to Swedish krona. So he's going to invoice you in Swedish krona. You've then got the requirement to buy Swedish krona. So you have to go to some financial institution, whether it's a bank or these days an app or an online broker or somebody like Cosmos, to do the currency exchange for you. Or it can be the other way around. You know, you, Paul, might have a client in Australia. And, you know, to make life easy for your client, you're going to bill them. You can bill them in Australian dollars, but then you've got a problem. Or you bill them in sterling, and then they need to buy sterling. So they have to go to their bank. Okay, so all currency exchange is, and there's various parts of the market. Keep it simple. There's three parts to the foreign exchange market. First part, which is the one most people know about, is the travel money market, where you, in the olden days, you have travelers' checks. Remember them? Or you have cash, or these days you've got cards, you know, prepaid cards, so that you can pay for a meal at your restaurant in Portugal or at the theatre in France or whatever the case may be. Then you've got the speculative part where people are day trading, you know, in front of screens with lots of charts and buy, sell, and they're trying to make money by trying to second guess which way the market's going to go and all the rest of it. That's quite popular with the movies and what have you. But the biggest part is what's called deliverable currency, which basically means you need to deliver currency to your supplier overseas. So it's got to go from your bank account to their bank account. Or you invoice an overseas client, so the payment has got to leave their bank account and credit your account.
Yeah.
And you need a mechanism to do that. And the banks can do it, online brokers can do it, apps can do it. They're all fine. Like most things, there's pluses and minuses. The big downside to the currency markets is in the last 20 years, it's been completely steamrolled by technology. So a lot of these firms, particularly the online brokers and that, don't even have a telephone number on their website. And so it's a very reactive transactional experience for clients. You need to make a payment, Paul. You go onto an app, you log in, you ask for a quote, they give you a quote, you've got 10 seconds to accept or don't accept.
And then it changes, doesn't it? The price changes.
Price changes every 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Night and day. So for those of you who are mathematically inclined, that's 28,800 changes every 24 hours.
Anybody gets that gets a gold star.
Exactly right. And the industry has gone completely transactional, has gone completely AI, and there's good reasons for it. There are solid business reasons why the industry has gone that way. From the point of view of the provider, it makes a lot of business sense, because what you do is you pay for the technology once. You then set up with an app or a website or both, and you've spent once on the technology, and then the client has to self-service. The problem is, from the client's point of view, number one, most clients have no idea about how the functionality of the currency exchange markets, and therefore the time of the purchase, so the time of the sale of the currency, is just a finger in the air exercise. The second problem is then the mechanics of it. All of a sudden, you've got to get a sterling there. But if I had £1 for every time in my 35-year career where somebody's gone on to some platform or app in the last 20 years and they've transacted on an app or a platform, the money's gone out of their account, and then 3 days later, they're going to work, and there's an irate email from their supplier saying, I thought you were going to pay me, Paul. And you go, I did, but money isn't here. You then go back on the platform or the app. There isn't even a telephone number. Where do you start trying to work out, where's my money? I know where it isn't. It's not in my account, and it's not in my supplier's account. So it's got to be somewhere in the middle. But where do I
That can cause
start?
any number of challenges, can't it? If a person
Huge.
doesn't get their money,
Imagine you're buying a house and you could lose that house because the money doesn't get to the solicitors. You
yeah,
know,
because that has
it
to be
could be
completed on a
really,
certain day. Has to be completed
exactly,
that day.
exactly. It can be really serious.
It's all
So
legally binding, so it has to be completed.
at the end of 35 years, I was pretty disillusioned with the corporate world, and I saw a gap in the market. And the gap in the market was to go right back to my early days, the early part of my career, before computers, before the internet, when bank managers were bank managers, when relationships mattered,
Yeah.
and think, okay, well, I've got the experience. I've always, every time I've moved jobs, I've taken a large percentage of clients with me. That's told me that clients don't really care whose name is above the door. They care that they're going to get looked after. So
Mm.
again, that element of personal trust.
It's massive.
And but anybody, just one sort of disclaimer I'd like to put in now is I have 40 years experience, but I can promise you that with me, it's still an educated guess. So for anybody listening to this, if you come across any salesperson in the financial world who tells you that they can read the market, run in the opposite direction as fast as possible, because it's
Yeah,
complete BS. You
really.
cannot run the market. And the reason you can't is very simple. Markets go up and down because of three factors: economics, politics, and sentiment. Okay, economics you can have a look at. Okay, last time inflation was this, or last time the unemployment rate was that, or the last time the Bank of England cut rates, this happened. Okay, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but after hundreds of years of economic data, it's a reasonable guess. The trouble is the other two, politics. How do you know what a politician is going to wake up and say tomorrow? You
You
don't.
don't.
And then you've got human sentiment. How is it that economic theory tells you that when interest rates fall, it devalues a currency? It's logical, because if you're a money manager in Hong Kong and you see that at midday yesterday the Bank of England cut rates, that means if you put your money in the UK, it's going to get less interest because they've cut interest rates. So you might decide to invest in America, where they didn't cut rates on Wednesday evening, for example. So explain how the Bank of England cut interest rates yesterday, but the pound went up. Hold on. How does that work? There are perfectly good reasons for it, but it's counterintuitive. And the problem with all these apps and the technology, don't get me wrong, the technology is extremely clever. And I couldn't function without it. Okay? But it's not the technology that's going to give clients the steer on when to do it. All the
Yeah,
technology
okay,
can do is say, at this moment in time, Paul, pound dollar is trading at 132.87 or whatever it is. You know? The technology is not going to tell you, but if you wait 2 days, we've got this data coming out on Tuesday, that should move it in this direction. Now, there's no guarantee of that, but at least it's a steer. So you're not making a completely stab in the dark as to when you do the timing of your conversion.
Yeah, totally. Because from the way that you've explained it, with the apps, you can't fault the technology, but there's almost a process missing where you're getting you're able to get proper educational direction from a human being that can tell you when this is the moment to transact. Because if you just transact, the app can do that all day long. But are you doing it at the right time? The app can do it, it's seamless. You'll get a notification to confirm the transaction's complete. You walk away happy. But what you don't realize, because we're not experts in this area at all, maybe we should have done that transaction 2 days before, or maybe we should do it next week. I don't know. I'm just picking up different
Yeah.
scenario. And over a period of time, that's significant just in terms of your savings,
Exactly.
Essentially the money you save.
Yeah, exactly right. And so the idea behind Cosmos is to add value.
Yeah.
And we add value by being proactive. We add value by being relationship based. We add value by holding the client's hands colloquially for as much or as little as they want. So what we don't have at Cosmos is situations where, for example, you're buying an apartment for the first time in Spain. All you know is you've gone out, you've had a look at the apartments, you like it, you've made an offer, it's been accepted. Somebody suggested this firm of local solicitors, you've said yes. And then they email you saying, Paul, next Wednesday I need the 10% deposit. And a month later I need a 90% balance. Okay. So you go to your bank, or you go on an app, or you come to Cosmos, or you go to an online broker, or you choose. But if you're not careful, and again, sadly, I've seen this so many times, you do the transaction, you send the money across, and then for whatever reason, the payment is held up because of a compliance issue. And then all of a sudden, you've got to have a mad scramble where, irrespective of what you've got scheduled on that day, you've got to drop everything because the solicitor all of a sudden sends you a long email asking you for your proof of ID and your proof of address and source of funds documents and this document and that document and all the rest of it. Most of these, because it's a process, if you work transactionally, you don't want to get involved in all that nonsense because it's work and cost for the provider. What you want is to get the money in and business, and then you sort out these details. But that's fine for the provider. It can be dangerous for the client because the client goes, right, I need to get the money to the solicitor on Wednesday, so I'll sort it out Tuesday, thinking you've got plenty of time. And you do, because nobody's told you that once the money arrives, then the compliance questions kick in. Contrast that with getting introduced by word of mouth to somebody like Cosmos, having a discovery call with us where we find out, so tell me, Paul, what are you looking at doing? What's your time frame? What's your availability of funds? What's your attitude to risk? All these kind of questions. Right, okay. So you need to register for a personal account, Paul. I'm going to need a proof of ID. I'm going to need a proof of address. I'm going to need source of funds documents. It can be as simple as a bank statement to show the money's in your savings account at the building society. You know, it's not rocket science, but I need these things. I need the details of the solicitors in Spain. I'm going to need a signed copy of the property purchase agreement. You can get all that to me when it becomes available. As soon as it becomes available, there'll be no delays on the release of the funds. So you know what you're doing. You're being guided every step of the way. When it comes to that Tuesday where you phone me up and say, Tony, can we buy the euros, please? Yeah, no problem. The rate today is bang. Is that okay, Paul? Happy with that? Yes, fine. Transact. You pay me the sterling. Euros go out. You buy your property because there are no delays, because we've forward covered everything that was going to be asked for.
And just a question around that. So say if a client rings you up and says, can we buy today or can we do something? And maybe they just rang up because we don't understand when to buy this, that, and the other. Maybe we want to buy because of, I don't know, maybe there's a date that we would like to complete the transaction by. But maybe from an exchange perspective, it may not. You might look at the market and think, well, I think you should buy next week, because if you buy next week, that means, X, Y, Z. Do you ever have those scenarios?
Oh, all the time. Most of my work, again, another way we add value, Paul, is by separating the buying of the currency from the delivery of the currency.
Oh, really?
So the client tells me, Paul tells me that the monies have got to be with the solicitors first thing on Wednesday morning. But on Friday afternoon, I noticed that the pound is at a 3-year high against the euro, for argument's sake. Question then in my mind is, do I risk waiting until next week when it could go down again? It could go up, but it could go down. Or do I speak to Paul? Well, it's actually not a stressful decision, because the truth of the matter is, Paul, it's not my money, it's yours. So the ultimate decision has to be yours. So there's no pressure on me. All I've got to do is be aware of the situation and then phone Paul up and say, look, Paul, here's a scenario. I know you don't need the money until Wednesday, but this afternoon you're getting the best rate for 3 months or 3 weeks or whatever it is. Okay. Now, on Monday, we've got this data coming out. The expectation is for it to be positive or negative. On Tuesday, we've got this happening. If you want to take the chance of waiting until next week, that's fine. But if you wanted to do it now, you're securing the best rate for this period of time, and then you don't have to worry about what the data says or what politician.
That's a godsend to have that level of comfort that you're working with somebody like you, Cosmos, that are able to. Because I think for most people that aren't in your space and know what you know, it's actually quite nerve-wracking. Feels quite complex. And also, if you get a phone call from your solicitor saying, I need this form, I need proof of purchase, I need the compliance agreements. When we get those types of calls, we literally go into free fall because we're just totally panicked, regardless of what we're doing. It's one of those moments when you might be at lunch with a colleague or a friend and they get a phone call and you suddenly see them go white because they're like,
that's right.
And they can't talk. So if you've got someone, so like, in those scenarios, if somebody gets that type of call, if they're working with you, you would cover that for them, so they wouldn't have to panic.
Absolutely, we'd have covered that long before, because I know, what's required more often than not, and if I don't know, I know where to ask to find out. Okay. So no last minute panics. There are clients who will say to me, don't phone me, Tony. When I have a requirement, I'll phone you when I have a requirement. And that's fine because it's the client's funds. But that's less than 10% of my clients. 90% of my clients work through the system of discovery call, time frame. Let me be your eyes and ears in the market. Let's set up the account. Let's get all the paperwork that's going to be needed in place so there's no last minute panics. And within your chosen time frame, when there's an opportunity, I'll let you know. What you do about it is completely up to you. You can say yes, no, maybe, let me think about it. I'll do half now and half later. It's completely up to you. But at least you've got all the facts and figures at your fingertips rather than, I'm going to be busy next week, so just do it now.
Okay, that totally makes sense. And for people listening, that essentially you could be a good fit for them. Maybe it might be for them. It could be for a colleague, it could be for an uncle, it could be for anybody that they know. Typically, what type of transaction would you be doing? Is it, I'm guessing there's maybe a number, there's maybe more than one.
Yeah, it's pretty wide ranging, Paul. So about 60% of our work is with personal clients.
Okay.
So that can be anything from property related deals or property purchases, property sales, payment of study fees. So that can be overseas students coming to study in the UK or UK students going to study overseas. It can be overseas medical bills, what we call collectibles. So I've got clients who like Harley Davidson motorbikes, or boats or soft top cars from the, muscle cars from the United States or whatever the case may be. I've got clients who invest in wine or jewelry or Rolex watches. That's quite wide bearing, all the way down to pension payments and family and friend payments. So it's quite wide ranging.
Okay. I didn't realise it was that wide. Okay.
And then 40% of my work is with business clients. And typically that will be importers and exporters. That will be businesses with overseas offices. A growing trend, certainly since last October's budget, with an announced increase to the national insurance contributions for employers and the national minimum wage. Sadly, we've seen a lot of businesses shed staff and use overseas remote workers. So they then need a mechanism to get the money out to the overseas team in the Philippines or Gambia or Thailand or India or Mexico or wherever they happen to be. So that's about 40% of our work is 40% for business clients, but that includes both making payments to suppliers or receiving funds from overseas clients.
I was thinking about, obviously to me, it sounds incredibly complex what you do. Obviously, you know what you're doing. So it's like you make the complex simplistic and you just do it. Obviously, you've got the knowledge base to do that. So it's incredible what you do. And I hadn't realized until I asked that question that there's quite a wide scope in terms of how you can support clients in a whole remit of different areas, which is, phenomenal. So for people that, say if there's somebody listening now and they would like to get in contact with you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, well, best place to start is our website, which is www.cosmoscurrencyexchange.com.
Okay.
And there's a contact form on there, and all my contact details are there as well.
Okay, lovely. I will put a link to your website on the show notes, so it's easy for people that are interested to contact you directly, and then
Perfect.
they can have a discussion from there. I've got two more questions, if I may.
Of course.
So one is, so just in your career today, which has been a wonderful one, career broke life, how important have the setbacks been, the challenges been to you?
Oh, I love my challenges.
I love this.
Love my challenges.
Why do you love your challenges?
Because you get put into a position where you sink or swim. You have to get on with it. Doing nothing is not an option. A simple example, and this underlines what was point the disclaimer I mentioned earlier about anybody who tells you they can read the market, run away from. Okay, so Tony Redondo has got 35 years experience, and I set up the business in 2020 in the middle of lockdown.
Yeah, okay.
Why? Do you know why? I remember having this conversation. I remember there were rumours that Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister at the time, was going to call a lockdown. There were rumours in the media. It didn't come out of the blue. There were rumours in the media.
Yeah, I think I remember those, yeah.
And I remember what I said at the time. I said, don't be stupid. This country went through 2 world wars and never locked down, and we're going to get locked down for the bloody flu. Are you nuts? That's how certain I was that we were never going to lock down. But we did. But we survived because the relationships, because people started struggling to make and receive payments as overseas banking systems started to quake a bit. Okay, and things got complicated, and they got fed up of spending hours and hours on a telephone and being pushed from pillar to post in a different telephone exchange. And luckily for me, again, another stroke of luck in my life, I've got an unusual surname. So it's not difficult to find me on LinkedIn or Google or what have you. So the phone started ringing off the hook from ex-clients of mine who were seriously stressed because their overseas clients weren't paying them, and they were worried they weren't getting any support from the banks. And they thought, oh, I know. I wonder if Tony's always, I wonder if Tony knows. Pick up the phone, look on LinkedIn, looked on Google. Is that you, Tony? Did you used to work on such and such? Yeah, that's right. Do you remember so and so? Yeah. Here's the situation. I've got a problem. Okay, what's the problem? Okay, well, let me help you. The answer to that is this.
So when you were getting those calls from people that were clients of yours previously, that obviously you've done a wonderful job for, so you stuck very fondly in their minds. Had you already set up your business, or did that give you the idea to set up your business?
No, I'd already set up.
Okay.
I'd already set up. But all of a sudden, far from being a disaster, COVID 2020 was great, because the one downside of being down in Cornwall pre-COVID was it's so far away from everywhere. So networking was a pain. Whereas all of a sudden with COVID and the lockdowns, everybody goes online and starts using Zoom and Teams and what have you. So all of a sudden it didn't matter where you were geographically.
And it doesn't today, does it? It doesn't today. People still like to use this, communicate, because I think clearly we still do like to meet when we can, but this just saves in terms of time, because like people increasingly conscious of their time, and they want to manage that as best they can. Obviously, COVID was an incredibly challenging time,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think in difficult moments, before we hit the record button, we discussed a number of challenging moments that we've seen in the last 5 years. There are opportunities there. There are
That's
scenarios
right.
where actually people are going to need us more because of those challenging times. And this is a case in point where the market dictated that it needed a Tony, a Cosmos to support them
Yeah,
because they couldn't get that support anywhere else.
that's
And
right.
another wonderful lesson you provided today is the value of retaining strong relationships, because if you didn't have those strong relationships, you wouldn't get them calls.
Absolutely,
So,
100%.
so your 35 years of harnessing, developing those relationships is critical. If you don't do that, because there will be people that were your peers that potentially are their own setup, but not getting the calls because maybe they didn't value the relationships. It was more of a transactional thing. Okay, got your money now. See you later. I'll call you up in 12 months for the renewal. That does
That's right.
happen. I've worked in environments or know people where that is purely transactional. Probably reached the end now. I do have one last question, if I may, which is the recurring question. So, if you could invite three inspirational people for dinner, so they can be alive or past, who might you invite?
Oh, goodness. What a question, Paul. What a question. Well, I would say Winston Churchill,
Yeah,
because without him, life would be very different in
yeah,
Western
absolutely,
Europe.
incredibly different.
And again, an amazing man who had right place at the right time, or was all his life training for the country's greatest hour of need in 1940.
Yeah,
Um, Really interesting person. Would love to have met him. Second one is a gentleman by the name of Thomas Sowell.
don't know him.
S O Thomas Sowell, Sowell. Fascinating academic, is economist, still alive, still prolific. I'd imagine by now Tom Sowell must have written upwards of 30 books.
Don't know him at
Has
all.
an amazing ability to explain complex things in common sense sentences, and has the most amazing life history. Born in a bird farm in Georgia,
In the States or
uh,
Georgia in Europe?
Georgia in the USA,
Okay,
in the deep south,
yeah,
in the Jim Crow era. Then went up to Harlem, but was a bit of a tearaway, but he had brains. And his brains were harnessed, and today is one of the most influential free market economic thinkers alive.
okay, I don't know him at all. I need to look him up.
Really interesting guy, and I love reading his books.
Okay,
Love reading his books. So he would be fascinating to meet. And the third one, I would say Abraham Lincoln, because again, he's famous for, quite rightly, for the Civil War, for the emancipation of slaves, for being honest Abe. But less people know is his background. Born in a dirt farm in Illinois, I believe, or Kentucky, one of the two. No schooling, self-taught. This might sound familiar. No,
yeah, and the penny hadn't dropped. It has now. Thank you.
self-taught reader. Very difficult relationship with his dad. Went through tremendous hardships. Became a lawyer. Had one term in the United States Senate,
Yeah, that bit I know. That bit yeah.
and which was very uneventful. And then, much to everybody's amazement, won the nomination for the Republican Party presidential candidacy against three much wealthier, much more connected rivals, and then invited those three rivals plus some Democrats into his cabinet.
I didn't know that.
And
Pretty
those
unprecedented.
people started by thinking he's not going to survive 5 minutes to openly weeping when he was assassinated.
Okay.
Again, an incredible life story. And it just shows how the power of the individual,
Mm.
you know, and I'm endlessly fascinated, as I mentioned to you several times, I like to read. I'm endlessly fascinated by the nature against nurture argument. And like I think a lot of things in life, there's not one correct answer. It's a bit of both. It's just percentages differ
What's
between
your percentage?
people. What's my percentage?
No, not your percentage. What percentage do you think is? Do you think there's an average percentage in terms of it leans on? No.
I think human beings are so individualistic.
Yeah.
But you know, there's got to be a bit of both. How would you put somebody, you know, like Lincoln or you know, or Tom Sowell?
Mm.
You know, if you said to 15-year-old Tom Sowell, you know, a black man in Harlem, you know, in the 30s, didn't know his parents, never known his dad, that he would be one of the 80 years later, he would have written 30, 40 books. He'll be a fellow of the Hoover Institute, and he'll be one of the most foremost living economic thinkers on the planet. You'd think, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you spell his surname again?
Sowell.
Okay. I'm going to look him up. My homework tonight. You've given me some homework.
No doubt you're in for a good start.
Podcast with you. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Tony, I've taken up so much of your time, but I've really enjoyed this discussion, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody that's watching this and listening to this equally has learned a lot. If you do want to connect with Tony, his details will be in the show notes. It'll be very simple for you to schedule a discovery call, and you can take it from there. But Tony, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Paul.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow the show. So if you're watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. It really does help us grow the channel. And your feedback is most welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. You can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the feedback page on the website. So take care for now. Bye. Hey there, just before you go, I currently have a couple of complimentary coaching slots available. These are one-to-one transformational coaching sessions designed to help you gain clarity, break through blocks, and move forward with confidence. If this sounds like something you benefit from, just check the link in the show notes to book your session. Take care for now.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.